Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. You guys know what time it is. Time to talk about current events in the online fitness community. And for those of you who like these type of videos, please remember to click like down below. Yet again, and it's going to sound like a broken record, guys, and people will be like, wow, man, you're being harsh. I don't know that I am. I've kind of said over and over, the serious competitive bodybuilding world, and I don't actually draw a distinction that is bodybuilding, is essentially a death cult. It is essentially a death cult, and it's a generally degenerate lifestyle. And it is a lifestyle that when you get involved in, it is going to destroy your quality of life. I'm not going to get into all the other stuff that goes along with it, but we're seeing lots of these guys dying lately, and we're going to see tons and tons more of it. And I predicted multiple of them. I mean, ahead of time, I said Dallas McCarver was going to be dead within a year, and he did. Same thing with Rich Piana. I actually predicted all this stuff. People remember it real time. I called all these like 6 months before they happened, in videos, dated, everything else. And it's because you can see all the signs of the stuff that happens in that world, and it's just a horrific thing. And you see these guys like this happens, and the people call it tragic, but it really isn't. And it's a case of that world has gotten so ludicrous in the way that it does things that uh, it's just predictable at this point. It's predictable at this point. It's not even tragic. It's self-inflicted. And people are saying, oh, yeah, it's all because they do gear. No, it's not even that. All right, guys, that's not even what it is. Because people will see these guys and say, oh, yeah, it's because they use gear. No, there are guys way smaller than a lot of these guys who are killing over, who abuse absurd amounts. Okay, look at Brandon Harding. It's all the emotional issues and everything he had. Look at the amounts that he was on. That's a lot. He was on massive amounts. He had like 30 pounds less muscle than this guy who just passed. Okay, perspective. Arnold and co. All of those guys abuse. They didn't just use stuff. They didn't just use stuff. They abused. They used abuse amounts. Most of them are still alive. Okay, most of them are still alive in their 70s. Some of them are just now passing. We're seeing more of them. We just saw Franco Colombo pass. They lived pretty long. So people say, well, what's the difference? Well, look at the difference in the guys. Okay, look at the difference in the guys. Do you honestly think the amounts of stuff people are using are even remotely close? It's not. I'm not even being anti-gear here. It's kind of like when we discuss the people who are using such quantities of different things and including all sorts of other substances that aren't even androgens, that have their own set of separate health problems that contribute, which is a big part of the problem. All right, these guys who have diabetes and all these other problems, that doesn't come from using androgens. These guys who have guts, distended abdomens, that doesn't come from using androgens, okay? That's not what happens. Again, you don't get a gut from using androgens. If anything, you have a smaller gut. So that's not what's happening either. So it's kind of the case of that's not being anti-gear. It would be like as if we had a problem where most people, who, let's say you were in a movement believing in legalizing cannabis. You were pro-cannabis, right? Because I am pro-legalization, actually. I actually am. I'm pro-legalization of anabolics. That's my official stance. I just believe in responsible adult use of these things. I believe it should be treated like alcohol, right? I think it should be treated at that level. That's how I view it, and it's probably about the same level of danger. So it should be restricted, age restricted, other things like that. But I generally support legalization. But it would be the case of, let's assume, so I'm going to put it in perspective because people lose the perspective here. Let's say you believed in cannabis legalization, okay? But there were groups of guys. There was a small percentage of cannabis users, maybe 0.01% of cannabis users were involved in a group of people who took it so extreme that they were smoking enough to actually die from it. Okay? Now, people would say, well, that would be almost impossible. But like, well, with the prices of it these days, in theory, if a person was willing to spend a couple $1,000s a month on really cheap bud, and they were to smoke that, if they were to smoke $100 worth of it every single day, or $300 or $500 worth, like you were to sit down and smoke pounds of it every day, you would probably expect that it would kill you possibly within a few years, right? A reasonable person would infer that. And everyone points it out and going, you guys are being ludicrous with the amount of this stuff that you use. This is insane. That's not being anti-cannabis. That's saying don't be an idiot. Okay, let's step over to the bodybuilding world. To be successful in bodybuilding, you have to be an idiot. Okay, let me state that again. To be successful in bodybuilding, you have to be an idiot in the amount of stuff you put in your body today. That's the reality. Like, nobody competing at any serious level in hardcore bodybuilding is not basically a moron who puts amounts of substances into their body that would just baffle your mind. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous and pointless. In case in point, look how ripped these guys get with the amount of size that they hold. Look at just the way that guy looked that we're talking about here on Instagram and other stuff. All right? Arnold and those guys didn't look like that. Do you think maybe there's a little bit of difference there? Do you think they're using the same quantities and type of things? Not even close. We're not even in the same ballpark. Then we have all this stuff like HGH and everything else, which is a garbage drug. But we've discussed that before as far as blood work and everything else. It's most moronic thing you could probably put in your body behind it, things like insulin and DNP, right? It has problems. Look, this is what's causing people to become diabetic. This is what's causing people to have insulin resistance, visceral fat, and some of the other stuff like the secretagogues like MK677. Look at anyone's blood work who uses it at this point. All right, look at their resting insulin. Look at their insulin resistance. All these things cause these problems. Okay, that combination, that's a recipe for disaster. Running high amounts of androgens with all this other stuff that causes you all of these other health issues, insulin resistance related issues. Okay, this is a problem. This is a problem big time. People are setting themselves up for a lot of harm. Same thing, all the diuretics and stuff they use. And on top of it, they have to diet down so lean. And let's come over to the other point. People say, well, some of these guys, I mean, that guy was big, obviously, but he wasn't that big. It's like, well, he was big for the body fat he was at. Comes back over to that other situation. In order to get that ripped and diet down that lean and to hold on to all that size, how much stuff are they using? I mean, go back over a perfect example, that kid Brandon Harding. Perfect example. He was on a lot of stuff. He was on a lot of stuff, guys. He should have been really, really big. It's my opinion, says me. That's what he was having to use just to starve himself down and hold on to the little bit of muscle he had. Okay, because he was basically doing a starvation diet to get ripped. You see the problem we're running into here? This is the situation we're dealing with. If you have a community that is so extreme with this stuff to where the extreme becomes the norm. This whole community over here gets pushed to the point to be competitive. They must be extreme. And it gets to the point where they just put out bad information. They put out bad information because they don't even really have to learn how to train always. They don't have to learn how to train always. I mean, it's stuff like I brought up recently with someone like Greg Doucette, and I might like some of his stuff, and I can appreciate certain elements of his channel, but the guy has been putting out garbage training information, but it's someone who has a lifelong history of heavy use, and then he stays on, even in his 40s now, he stays on pretty significant amounts year round. Well, do you think his training information has to be that phenomenal at that point? Guy's genetically gifted, always stays on. And it ends up trickling down to the rest of the world. Just bad training advice, bad training information. Because these guys don't have to learn how to do any of that stuff correctly. I'm not saying a lot of them don't train hard. Some of them do, some of them don't. That's not the point. A lot of them train pretty badly. And then we come back over to this. A lot of these guys are dropping dead. They're dropping dead. Because their lifestyles are that atrocious or that egregious. And the problem is that this is thrown in our face all the time as if this is some sort of healthy or fit lifestyle. Or people will see the guys like that, like these guys who are passing away, and they go, oh, well, yeah, of course they're using some stuff. Okay, let's come back over to the point. That's like saying your friend smokes a little bit of weed. He smokes some weed when he smokes 2 pounds every day. Okay? And then you would look at that and go, oh, it's not even possible. Well, if you look at the doses some of these guys use, it would be just as hard to smoke 2 pounds of weed every day physically as to put into your body what some of these guys do. Some of these guys are basically pinning all day long. Just like you're like, well, that guy would have to be smoking nonstop. Well, some of these guys are pinning 12 times a day. and eating entire handfuls of pills. Okay, that is that extreme. It is that extreme. That's the equivalent. And then people wonder why they're having health issues and dropping dead. And then on top of that, they diet down to ridiculously low body fats. And then it encourages other people to do so, including naturals. You know what happens when you diet down to the sort of body fats these guys are at? Number one, you look like an anorexic if you're not on gear. All right, number one. Number two, destroys your health, kills your sex drive, everything else. Can cause you problems for life. All right, dieting down as lean as some of these guys get can require you to be on supplemental testosterone, supplemental thyroid, and everything from your doctor for the rest of your life. Okay, that's the simple reality. This whole lifestyle that they push is absolutely ludicrous. And this is the effect. And you're going to see more and more and more. People keep saying, oh yeah, we're having all these tragedies. They're not tragedies. They're self-inflicted and they're predictable. They're predictable at this point. And there's a point where people need to just step back and say, look, I'm going to quit supporting this whole bodybuilding nonsense. Because we're at a point where it's like Scooby said, professional bodybuilding. Scooby said this recently, earlier this year. Professional bodybuilding is nothing more than a contest to see who can take the most drugs and not die. Promoting this whole thing would be literally like promoting a contest to see who could smoke the most crack and survive. Okay, without like dropping dead from it. That is the equivalent from a health and fitness perspective of what bodybuilding is and has been for quite a while. And people need to just quit supporting this madness. They need to just quit supporting it. That's my opinion, says me. Alright guys, well that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.